The interaction between mortals and immortals we see here is perhaps a clue as to the type of relationship these two groups, or races, will share. I envision the immortals being viewed as mentors or elder statesmen, honored patriarchs and matriarchs, and respected priestly judges by the rapidly expanding mortal populations of the millennium. The two groups will mix freely, working together to rebuild the world. But in our resurrected bodies, the immortals will have abilities and characteristics far beyond those of our mortal brothers, a preview of what awaits them in eternity if only they'll follow Yahweh as we did. Will the prince collect taxes? Yes, but they're not your usual Middle Eastern potentate sort of thing. They won't be spent on lavish palaces or the upkeep of his harem. Rather, they're so that he might provide offerings in the temple on behalf of the people.
This is the tax you must give to the prince. 1 bushel of wheat or barley for every 60 you harvest, 1% of your olive oil, and 1 sheep for every 200 in your flocks in Israel. These will be the grain offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings that will make atonement for the people who bring them, says the sovereign Yahweh. All the people of Israel must join the prince in bringing their offerings. The prince will be required to provide offerings that are given at the religious festivals, the new moon celebrations, the Sabbath days, and all other similar occasions.
Apparently, we're ditching the Gregorian calendar system and going back to the lunar system, months starting at the new moon, making them about 29.5 days long, with an intercalary month added 7 years out of every 19 to keep the season straight.
He will provide the sin offerings, burnt offerings, grain offerings, drink offerings, and peace offerings to make reconciliation for the people of Israel.
The examples given here are keyed to an agrarian society, of course, but I have no reason to doubt that there will be an industrial equivalent when the time comes. As taxes go, these could hardly be called oppressive. They average about 1% of the increase, and they're tied directly to past blessings on the part of Yahweh. In marked contrast to our taxation system in America and elsewhere, this is not a graduated income tax designed to redistribute wealth taken from those who are productive and given to those who are less so. It is rather a systematic reminder of God's grace and sacrifice for us, a way to say thank you. Apparently, the prince administers offerings for the nation as a whole, while individuals still bring their offerings for their own personal sins or thanksgiving. The feasts of Yahweh, so significant in the unfolding of God's plan for the redemption of mankind, will be celebrated with new understanding and, I dare say, gratitude in the millennial temple.
This is what the sovereign Yahweh says. In early spring, on the first day of each new year, sacrifice a young bull with no physical defects to purify the temple. The priest will take some of the blood of this sin offering and put it on the doorposts of the temple, the 4 corners of the upper ledge on the altar, and the gateposts at the entrance to the inner courtyard. Do this also on the 7th day of the new year, for anyone who has sinned through error or ignorance. In that way you will make atonement for the temple. Ezekiel 45:13-20 NLT.
This, if I'm not mistaken, is the only biblical mention of the celebration of a New Year's Day, the real Rosh Hashanah, a significant day, though not one of the 7 prophetic Mikram, or feasts of Yahweh. The first actual holy convocation is Passover, about 2 weeks after this. On the first day of Nisan each year, the blood will be applied to the portals that lead to Yahweh's inner chamber. The lesson is obvious. One cannot gain access to God without the shedding of blood, the sacrificial atonement for sin. The blood of the bull, however, atones for nothing in itself, but points back to the historical reality of Yahshua's sacrifice. The rite on the first day of Nisan was not part of the Levitical law. It's significant, however, that Yahweh instructed that
you will make atonement for the temple.
Why? It's a very special place to be sure, but just a building nevertheless. Remember, though, we were specifically told that everything about the temple environs demonstrated the holiness of Yahweh. This is no exception. The temple needs atonement because it's a metaphor for our mortal bodies. As Paul's rhetorical question explains,
"Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own?" 1 Corinthians 3:16, 6:19.
The Holy Spirit of God lives within us and will live within the believing mortals of the millennium as well. Thus the annual atonement of the temple is indicative of our constant need to dedicate our bodies as a living sacrifice to Yahweh, that is, someone set apart for His purposes.
On the 14th day of the new year, you must celebrate the Passover. This festival will last for 7 days.
All 3 spring feasts are in view here, for the 7-day feast of the unleavened bread, including both Passover and firstfruits, was often simply referred to as Passover.
Only bread without yeast may be eaten during that time.
Yeast, or leaven, if you remember, is a picture of sin.
On the day of Passover, the prince will provide a young bull as a sin offering for himself and the people of Israel. On each of the 7 days of the feast, he will prepare a burnt offering to Yahweh. This daily offering will consist of 7 young bulls and 7 rams without any defects. A male goat will also be given each day for a sin offering. The prince will provide a half bushel of flour as a grain offering and a gallon of olive oil with each young bull and ram.
The original Mosaic instructions for the daily Passover sacrifices had specified 1 ram and 7 lambs, changed here to 7 bulls and 7 rams. The emphasis in the light of Christ's historical accomplishment is upon completion, perfection. It is finished. More specifically, the singular ram of Moses' time was predictive of the Messiah's unique sacrifice. Since this is now a fait accompli, 7 rams now commemorated. Bulls were the sacred sacrificial animals of choice for virtually every ancient culture. Thus I perceive that they are a symbol in God's economy of falsehood and apostasy, of institutionalized evil on a national as well as personal level. Case in point, Aaron's golden calf debacle. Cattle symbolize several things. In agrarian societies, cattle represented temporal wealth. The more cattle you owned, the wealthier you were. Indeed, a fattened calf was the symbol for luxurious living. Killing a fattened calf in order to entertain a guest was considered a mark of great honor. But cattle or oxen were also beasts of burden, a metaphor for doing work. There's a fine line between service and servitude, between working in grateful response to Yahshua's grace and working in order to obtain it. Every religion in the world focuses on work as a means to achieve heaven, whatever they conceive that to be. But our works are as pointless in establishing a relationship with Yahweh as they would be in any family. A child can't earn his way into the family. He must be invited into it, either by physical birth or by adoption, receiving and accepting the invitation. Thus, the bull represents the wrong way to approach God. You can't buy or work your way to Him. It's an insult to Him to even try. The sacrifice of 7 bulls is thus an indication that this false portal to Yahweh has been completely removed from Israel.
During the 7 days of the Festival of Shelters, which occurs every year in early autumn, the prince will provide these same sacrifices for the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the grain offering, along with the required olive oil. Ezekiel 45:21-25 NLT.
Neither the Feast of Weeks nor the other 2 fall festivals, the Feast of Trumpets or the Day of Atonement, are specifically mentioned. Perhaps this is because at this point in time these 3 Mikram have no future fulfillment. They are strictly memorial. But Passover and Tabernacles, symbolizing God's grace and His abiding with men, are both still vitally relevant to the millennial mortals. Here again we see different offerings than those required under the Mosaic law. They're the same as for the new spring feast. All these little differences demonstrate conclusively that Ezekiel's temple vision was not meant to simply restate Levitical ritual for the benefit of the apostate Jews of his day, but is designed to reflect the finished work of Yahshua for a generation yet to come. And just because the Mikram of weeks, trumpets, and atonement haven't been singled out in Ezekiel, we can't automatically conclude that they will be dropped. The Mosaic law specifically states concerning the Feast of Weeks, for instance, that
it shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. Leviticus 23:21.
Perhaps it isn't mentioned because nothing at all was changed. Is it just me, or is the incredible detail of Yahweh's revealed plan, the way this big jigsaw puzzle is all coming together, giving you goosebumps too? Everything fits. Even if the picture is crystal clear in some spots and slightly out of focus in others, it's because he wants us to concentrate on one visual plane. It's like what artists call aerial perspective. The background, the parts of the picture that aren't the main subject, are not as sharp or not as brightly colored. They're important supporting information, but they aren't the point. Yahweh's subject is his love, his sacrifice, and his provision for us. Everything else is Purple Mountain's majesty.